Welcome to another episode of the Apex Perspective podcast. Today I have with me Ashish Vaidya, who is currently the principal engineer at Amazon. Now, Ashish started off as a software engineer at Noble Inc. and subsequently led at other companies leading software engineering. And of course, right now, now specifically Ashish is focused on technical vision architecture, particularly at Amazon. He's leading a 200-person team focusing on the developments of the Alexa entertainment systems. But Ashish, can I hear from your perspective? Tell me a little bit more about your background. What led you to what you're doing today?
Thanks for having me today, Aryan. Uh, Believe it or not, when I started my journey as a software professional in 2004, I'll go back to like when I started my undergrad. I didn't even know how to operate a computer. And
Really?
yeah, and starting from writing my first Hello World program to to the journey today, where I am working at Amazon, designing the global scale ambient computing systems. It has been an incredible journey, and
Mhm.
there are few things I learned along the way. And if I look back, just thinking about when or what drove the shift coming from like just starting with it to reaching a point where I am able to invent new stuff, file patents, and make significant improvements for global AI systems like Alexa.
Mhm.
um, I think it happened when I realized that building and developing software and optimizing it at scale is fundamentally different from just writing code.
Mhm.
Uh, I have had the privilege of working on all sort of systems, starting from working on kernel to designing and implementing interaction protocols on the internet, and later developing applications on mobile, on wearable devices, advertising systems, language translation systems, and most recently, like the cutting edge applications for the ambient computing, right?
Mhm.
So when you are operating at that scale, you are not just solving tech puzzles. It's essentially taking care of so many things. You have to think about not just how to get something out, but even aspects like costs, latency, organizational
Mhm.
priorities, frictions, uh,
Mhm.
and have to learn to quickly understand and iterate again and again to deliver the best value for the users, right?
Mhm.
So when I stepped looking at myself as just a programmer and
Mhm.
started looking at myself more of as an architect of not
Mm.
just systems but alignments all across, I think that's when everything started accelerating.
Interesting. So, at what point did you realize you're not just programming and actually developing a product for the end user? When do you make that distinction, and how did that impact the way you operate?
I think in the early years, you typically just have mindset. Okay, this is the new thing. So why I wanted to come to computer science was um, it 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 gave you a platform to just build anything, right? Like
Right.
you're not constrained by what are the resources you have. All you need is a computer. That's all.
Right. Yeah.
Initially, everything is like, hey, about learning how to program, how to build something. But that's when you're operating very individually. Once I started working professionally, is when I learned gradually that, hey, there is much more to software engineering rather than just writing code. And I think
Mhm.
it's even more important in today's world when you have a lot of AI agents that can help you write code. But that's one differentiates. Like it's not just about writing code, but making the right kind of decisions and
Mhm.
driving alignments all across. So what you build is not just a one-time demo. It's something
Mhm.
that can be used by millions and millions of people on a daily basis and derive value out of it.
Once you made that decision where you're not just making it, you're not just programming itself, how did you change your behavior or how did your approach change? Did you get acquainted with the end users more? Do you talk to
Mhm.
different departments? How did that change?
Yeah. So I think that's what I do as principal engineer, right? Like
Mhm.
a part of my daily activity is getting closer to what users want. And
Right.
sometimes users don't tell that directly, but how we learn of it is through measurement. So I'll tell you a very interesting anecdote. In Alexa, we just observed through some feedback online that some customers were saying, hey, I'm asking Alexa to start music, it says it's starting music, but it's not happening. Now,
Hmm.
we didn't have any existing metrics to tell that. When I started probing and going a little deep, I found that was happening for about 5% of our play queues, which is a significant number. And to solve that, I built a system that tracked exact user journey, what user
Hmm.
goes through. So, what are the key points that we should capture? So, earlier we were capturing like one single point. Hey, we did this. What happened? But now having a full picture of the customer journey helped us identify even hidden patterns that we never knew earlier and fix them. And that resulted in eliminating over 50% of customer perceived defects and
Wow.
increasing the reliability of the product significantly.
And this is without them reporting on those minor issues.
Yeah, there were no direct reportings. There might be like here and there, but that's where the when you start thinking in terms of not just single features, but look for the overall as a whole
Experience.
and identify. I'm obsessed with defining the right metrics and making
Right.
sure we are capturing the right
Very
things.
interesting.
Yeah. And I have defined multiple metrics for Alexa, and some of them even have become standard across Alexa for tracking
Wow.
and even taking annual improvement goals for past multiple years. Now, they give us the kind of understanding and learning that we can make the right decision on behalf of customers to
Mhm.
create really exciting and delightful experiences. Uh,
Certainly.
tying back to your question, like how my behavior changed. So this is one example, but I want to stay close to my customers. I want to
Mhm.
observe what is actually happening. The second
Mhm.
thing is working across teams. Now,
Mhm.
in my role, although I am working in the audio org at Alexa, which is like 230, 240 people, but my influence doesn't stop at those boundaries. I'm working with partners all across, like the Spotify's, the Apple Music, Amazon Musics of the world, right?
Mhm.
So to ensure when you are operating at that scale, handling
Mhm.
about 40-45% of Alexa's global traffic, you cannot manage by just executing tasks or
Right.
tracking goals. What is required is, and what I follow is one, the ruthless alignment on the architecture. Uh,
Mhm.
what that means is to make sure everyone understands what our vision is, what is our architectural North Star, and then I
Mhm.
instill mechanisms to make sure it is enforced so that
Correct. Yep.
everyone in my org and even outside of my org, they can move independently. They are not bottlenecked on me verifying or somebody checking like
Mhm.
what they are doing. The second thing is building a culture of
Mhm.
focus on the end-to-end quality. Uh, we don't want that one optimization in a microservice or like a single feature built here ultimately regresses the overall CX quality, right? So
Right.
establishing that culture that, hey, everyone is responsible for overall quality, not just your single feature. So come out of silo and look at the whole and only accordingly
Love
make
that
decisions,
perspective.
right?
Yes.
And lastly, as I was saying earlier, telemetry as the truth. At that
Mhm.
scale, your opinions don't matter. The only thing that matters is what data tells and
Right.
how you can extract the right story out of the data.
Mhm.
And as I was saying, like I'm obsessed with metrics, and that
Yes.
has helped me unlock 1.2 billion additional dialogues for Alexa annually, while
Wow.
saving millions of dollars in infrastructure and compute costs.
What was very compelling what you're talking about is really understanding the customer journey, specifically identifying improvements without the actual customer reporting on the problem. What were the key indicators in the customer journey you look for that could be indications of improvement? Because that's difficult to identify when you don't have people reporting on that particular problem.
Mhm. Yeah. So some of the things are functional, right? You are looking at, hey, this thing should work like this, and it is not working. So let's say in a workflow, you are expecting A should, after A, B should happen, then C should happen. And
Hmm.
if something is not matching what you expect, there might be an
Hmm.
anomaly.
Okay.
Those are much easier to figure out and address, right? So that's where like building a time sequence build the system we built to kind of observe this can help. But then there is another aspect of non-functional aspects. Now again, the non-functional aspects are like the latency, the cost. Typically there is not much focus, but that has entirely been my focus for past 4 or 5 years. uh,
Hmm.
and I was talking earlier, like it has helped unlock 1.2 billion additional dialogues for Alexa. That
Hmm.
didn't come from just launching new features, but identifying the inefficiencies and making Alexa faster.
Hmm.
Now, there have been many studies like Google has done, I think all the large companies has done. Like latency is one of the key drivers that can help accelerate or deaccelerate your business. At
Hmm.
Amazon scale, having 1 second of additional latency can translate into about $7 billion of lost revenue annually. You just
Wow.
not afford that, right?
Right.
Similarly, for Alexa, we found that every few milliseconds of latency can
Hmm.
have a significant downstream impact on customer retention,
Right.
the return, right? So I have been focused on, hey, how we can reduce
Hmm.
latency, how we can improve the behavior so that customer feels they are talking naturally to another human being and not just a device lying on their table.
Right.
Uh, right? And it has demonstrated those effects while we are now building with large language models, bringing those into picture. These models can take seconds to respond. And what we have to build systems intelligently is identify where we need to use their intelligence
Hmm.
versus what are the tasks where we should rely on the traditional rule-based methodologies. Uh, my patents that I have filed in like last 1 to 2 years
Hmm.
try to focus on solving these kind of problems.
These niche specific problems.
Yeah. So
Hmm.
these are more like you can absolutely throw latest and greatest fundamentally the biggest or the best foundational large language model, but
Hmm.
it's like using a freight train to deliver a single package. It
Right.
works, but
Inefficient.
yeah, it's not just inefficient, it's computationally and economically reckless.
Right.
And when you are operating at scale, the costs compound. You are not going to be able to sustain that, right? So
Right.
it's not about building a demo and showing it to few people. You, if you are building something that needs to live there and continue to be used by people, you need to identify like where the compute costs are giving the return that's expected versus where that is like utter sheer waste, right? So
Excellent point.
my patent portfolio that I did in the past 3 years, um,
Hmm.
the first thing was, instead of trying to use the biggest and the best model for everything,
Hmm.
doing the intelligent dynamic selection and then choosing the most optimal model for the task at hand.
Hmm.
Second piece is where I say more is less. So eliminate unnecessary inferences in the automated workflows
Hmm.
and develop mechanisms for that. And lastly, you have to use RAG to make sure the outcome is grounded. But
Hmm.
using RAG multiple times can significantly slow down and can be prohibitively costly, right?
Sure.
My focus was like one of my inventions was like how we can concentrate the RAG output, but also manage the hallucination of model by progressively uh, relaying the information to model and selectively withholding it in the
Hmm.
subsequent inferences. So that has been my focus of
Very interesting.
yeah, the overall my patent portfolio recently.
Excellent. Well, also like to talk about the leadership approach as well. As I've seen in terms of your career, leading a 200-person team compared to primarily being a programmer is a little bit of a different skill set. How
Mhm.
did you transition to leadership? What did you have to notice that you have to adapt to on the actual spot? And what are your current strategies in terms of that leadership you have today?
So I think I started talking about earlier a little bit. One
Yeah.
is setting the architecture North Star is very important.
Right.
Unless you have a clear vision, um, it's very difficult. You cannot handhold people. It would just
Right.
make everything slow, right? So
Hmm.
at scale or at like 200 or even larger scale, it's very important to make sure people can operate in an autonomous manner, but
Sure.
you have the right kind of mechanisms and guardrails in place that ensures that
Everyone's on track.
everyone is on track, they are marching towards the same goal. And it
Hmm.
often happens in business that you might have to make some short-term decisions that may deviate from your eventual goal, but they
Sure.
are deliberate, they are thought through and for a reason, and you correct the trajectory, right? You have corrective actions defined and scheduled. Otherwise it's like a 1 degree deviation at takeoff can take a flight hundreds of miles away from destination if not course corrected, right? So similarly, I make sure we define a North Star and I instill
Hmm.
mechanisms that enforce that we all are marching towards that. Second, I alone cannot work with
Of
like
course.
hundreds of people, right? And it's not just like my team, but multiple other teams. So I need to scale through others. And
Hmm.
that is something I've learned in past few years and I have
Hmm.
been actively working on improving. So
Hmm.
I have bunch of individuals I would call my lieutenants that I scale
Hmm.
through. So I would
Hmm.
be able to lean on them to help ensure that we align on something, and
Hmm.
then they work with the people they are directly connected to.
How do you choose those people? What do you look
Uh,
for?
it's very interesting. So mentorship is something I have been fortunate to have a lot of
Hmm.
great mentors, and that has helped me reach where I am. So I see that as not just a job function, but an opportunity to pay back. So it's fortunate that in a large organization like Amazon, you always have highly inspired, motivated, and very interested people who are continuously wanting to improve and scale. Uh,
Hmm.
a lot of times they reach out, but a lot of times when I find like somebody is just being they are holding themselves back, I reach out to them and try to mentor them, that hey, let's work on this. I work closely with their manager also to chalk out that hey, I think this person fits well for leading this charter and I would want
Hmm.
to partner with them. So making sure the person, the manager, all are aligned, and then we have clear expectations set where I work with them
Got it.
to achieve those goals. Those are some of the strategies I follow. Yeah.
Is any of your team, are they global or is it mainly based in the US?
No, we have a global presence. My team,
Okay.
we are in US. We have presence in Canada, Vancouver.
Right.
We have presence, a substantial presence in India,
Hmm.
in Chennai and Bangalore.
Very
So
interesting. So
mm,
the question for you is, I've had some conversations with some executives in the merger and acquisition space, and a part of the problem, some problem that happens in mergers and acquisitions, are the global potential mergers, right? Because there are different teams from different locations. Potential issues of clash of culture can occur, and that can make things a bit more difficult. So, how do you approach specifically global leadership when that's a potential concern?
um, honestly, like I have worked previously in Prime Video, where I was
Hmm.
for about 2 to 3 years.
Hmm.
Uh, Again, we had global presence.
Okay.
We had presence in Europe, we had presence in US, we had presence in India, and similarly with Alexa.
Hmm.
Uh, I feel again it comes down to one having very clear picture of where we want to be. right?
Okay.
Like the dynamics that change is being in the proximity versus being in a total different time zone, and
Hmm.
we need to manage that. There needs to be some sort of flexibility, but that alone doesn't uh, address that. So to manage things globally, we're working with global teams. I make sure of two things. One, they don't get bottlenecked on, and so one is they don't get a bottleneck. So to
Okay.
enable that, I make sure I have office hours scheduled at mutually convenient times where
Okay.
people can frequently access me. And second thing is they should not feel out of picture, that some things are happening that they don't know about, right?
Right.
uh,
Right.
so that is like requires fundamental change in how organization approaches how the communication happens. Everything should be documented to as much as possible, and I
Hmm.
think COVID gave us all a chance to kind of operate where we were not physical close to each other. So
Hmm.
at Alexa and within Amazon, we have this culture of documenting as much as possible. And what I try to do is make sure my learnings I keep documenting in a a live document which is always accessible to all, so that
Hmm.
people stay up to date on here what's happening around. And similarly, in my org, the leaders continue to do the same, so that even the teams that are not here physically,
Hmm.
they are always in the know what is happening, what are the changes coming, and they can adjust themselves accordingly. So it's again about enabling autonomy at scale.
Hmm.
That's how I see it.
And reducing the friction and division, I think that's very, very important as well. As you said, you informing them about these developments that are happening, the office hours, that makes them, I'm assuming, feel they're part of the team, even if they're from a different country. I think that's a different,
Exactly.
that's a very important perspective to have, because those small, minute differences changes the actual behavior in the team. So I really
Exactly.
appreciate the perspective you provided there.
And one
Now,
more
go
thing
ahead,
to
please.
stat here, like what I love about one of the mechanisms we have developed, we have
Hmm.
these weekly demos that anybody can just sign up for and display. They don't have to do a lot of preparation, they don't have to follow a particular format, but that allows people to feel more connected. Anybody from
Right.
anywhere can come showcase their work and ask for feedback or provide feedback. That also brings a sense of togetherness and working as a team.
Mhm. Excellent. So what I'd like to do now is have a very brief conversation on agentic AI and your perspectives on this
Mhm.
specifically. So, Ashish, as you know, there's been quite, I mean, of course, AI has been a hot topic for many years, but doing it with maximum impact is different than actually applying it for the sake of doing it. So
Yeah.
I want to know what your perspective is on utilizing agentic AI in a manner that actually maximizes impact, and how do you distinguish between that and an approach that is simply utilizing AI for the sake of doing so?
It's a very interesting question again, and I can give my perspective. You see, for decades, all of our infrastructure and architecture has been built entirely on determinism. Take a
Mhm.
calculator, for example. You enter 1 plus 1, you are bound to get 2, right?
Right.
But in when we talk about the today's AI systems, they can invent answers and do so very confidently, that you cannot, without querying, distinguish whether it's an invented answer or is it a fact, right?
Mhm.
So working with the AI systems requires a change in mindset that
Mhm.
we have come to develop, like looking at computer systems that more and more deterministic, but now it's changing. So the other thing is, I see a lot of people and companies treating AI systems as a oracle, all knowing, but I see them differently, and this comes from another senior principal I work with.
Mhm.
You need a different mindset to see those systems as more of a unlimited army of interns you can
Mhm.
utilize to uh, assign tasks and get done. But
Mhm.
you need to be in control. You
Mhm.
need to tell them exactly, because otherwise they can hallucinate a lot. And in certain areas like finance, healthcare,
Legal trouble comes when that happens.
yeah, the it's not just legal. The cost of hallucination
Yep.
could be catastrophic. Like in healthcare, you would not just want a agent deciding without a human in the loop, right?
Hmm.
So I have seen this policy in a lot of places, people trying to force these non-deterministic models to behave in a deterministic way. It just cannot happen, right? So what we need instead is to understand their behavior and build deterministic scaffolding around it.
Hmm.
How I approach is one, is identifying the execution boundaries. Like, first, understand where it makes sense to apply
Hmm.
AI and where it makes sense to just go with the traditional rule based systems where
Hmm.
they work best, right? And not try to use one for where other is more better suited. And I was
Hmm.
talking earlier about my portfolio of patents, right? That's one
Hmm.
of like, identify what is the optimal system to use for task at hand. The
Hmm.
second is the blast radius containment, like
Hmm.
legal issues, or there could be like life dependency even on some of the decisions.
Hmm.
So there we need to implement rigid checkpoints and fallbacks, entirely based upon the risk profile and the
Hmm.
confidence of the output. So not
Hmm.
just give me the output, but work with that. And lastly, gated execution. Like in some of these sectors, you definitely need a human in the loop. You don't want a probabilistic system being able to pull a trigger that can have catastrophic outcomes, right?
Hmm.
So those are like kind of some of the thinkings that need to go in when we are building these systems for scale and not
Excellent.
for showcasing a demo.
Exactly. So, in other words, you look at the outcome you want, you look at the specific system that will fit it, but you also question what are the limits? What
Mhm.
are the limits of these systems, and where does it need to be? Where does it need to be guardrails? Where does there need to be checkpoints? Because, as you said, and as we all know, a mistake with a hallucination in a healthcare situation, it's leading to it can't happen. That can lead to actual legal troubles, but not only that, but significantly other big vulnerabilities that can happen as a result of that. Now, another question for you is utilizing AI and agentic AI at scale, it can also open up a cybersecurity risk. So
Mhm.
what are we know those that's a limitation. So how do you approach that balance of knowing how much value it can add and also understanding the limits?
So cybersecurity risks are one thing. There
Yeah.
are other aspects as well. So yeah, let's talk about cybersecurity.
Yeah.
Uh, there have been many examples recently where unchecked usage of AI has led to deletion of entire databases, has led to opening security vulnerabilities that have been exploited by you know uh, actors that don't act in the best interest of general populace.
Mhm.
But we are also going through an overall global processing power shortage that is required by these AI systems, right? That's where like using them more diligently and in more responsible manner is not just a good to have. It can become a existential requirement for a lot of organizations.
Mhm.
uh, Similarly, like you would have seen like in recent times all the AI providers, be it
Mhm.
OpenAI, Anthropic, or they have been tightening the limits. Even on the paid plans, people are getting surprised by, hey, things are changing. What happened? So you also cannot just have complete reliance on an AI model where you don't control how it can change tomorrow. So
Mhm.
that would be, just like cybersecurity risk is one, but there are many other risks. So you
Right.
have to build systems that are model agnostic, right? You cannot
Mhm.
have a complete
Right.
dependency. And that was like one of the deliberate decisions we took while we were building Alexa Plus.
Mhm.
The recently launched overhauled version of Alexa. So rather than having dependency on the a certain model, which
Mhm.
can continue to get replaced by a different model,
Hmm.
be it because of the security risks, be it because of cost challenges or anything. Um, what we decided deliberately, okay, we may not be able to use the latest features offered by a new coming model immediately,
Hmm.
but that would give us opportunity to be able to scale independently and not have a complete dependency on a single model, and that is required as we continue to build enterprise level systems in any sector.
Hmm. Excellent. So these are amazing perspectives. Now, what I want to do is go ahead and shift the conversation to a little bit more about you, Ashish, and on more on the personal side. So I know you mentioned at the beginning of this podcast that at some point you didn't know how to utilize the basic functions of the computer. But what I'm curious about is how did you choose to go forward with software engineering, which is extremely technical, when you're at that point where you perhaps didn't know how to operate a computer properly?
um, what I did that time, I was sitting in like my classes, and
Hmm.
it's at a point seemed almost hopeless. Everyone around me seemed to have figured it all out. They were
Yeah.
talking data structures, algorithms, and I felt like, hey, there's some kind of alien language that I don't even know.
Yeah.
Uh, so I reached out to one of my seniors who I really appreciated, and he just told me one thing. He said, like, you know what, just do it yourself. Now, let that sink in. Um, it was very easy to just copy somebody's assignment and submit next day. It was very
Hmm.
easy to just search Google for something, but as feedback was, there's only one way of learning things. You have to just do it yourself. And I did took that to heart. I did keep trying that, and it worked in my favor.
Hmm.
Within, I think, one semester, I could reach a point where it didn't feel at all alien to me. Yes, it required putting additional hours. It required foregoing some of the parties that I would not attend, but rather focus on that. But it was all worth it, and
Yeah.
that's the kind of mental model I still use.
Yes.
And in today's world, it's very important to keep learning and relearning, right? Like at the pace the things are changing. So I still do the same. I tend to do it myself.
How
Now,
did you, apologies for interrupting you, but how did you make that decision to sacrifice that part of your social life for something like this? What was the decision making process in that?
I think it comes from the family qualities I had. My parents had always seen like pushing hard to achieve what they wanted to do, always better, to always compete with yourself and not with others.
Hmm.
So I think I had inherited those qualities, and at that point of time, the only thing was, hey, here I am now. Success is the only acceptable outcome. So
I
I have
like
to
that.
do whatever needed to make it happen.
I love that. I have the exact same perspective. The only thing that's acceptable as an outcome is success. I
Yeah.
think with that particular operation, it impacts your behavior completely. Every decision, every action you make, it's driven by that particular perspective in mind. I think that's what's going to differentiate you between people who are doing are operating without that particular like mental model, right? Because the amount you're willing to sacrifice, the amount you're willing to go through is significantly higher than what you're willing to go through when you don't know what that mental framework is. So I really appreciate that. Now, the other question I have for you is what is something about you that you wish more people knew about?
Uh, so I have a lot of interests beyond just my what I do in professionally, and it has become increasingly challenging over the years.
Hmm.
So w- that, and I am currently working on treating my life similar to treating how I treat my professional life. Same thing to my personal life. So
Hmm.
me and my wife, we operate like a startup. We have well defined and engineered goals for the
Okay.
year and a long term perspective of where we would want to be. And so one of the things like reaching total financial independence by
Hmm.
next August, and
Hmm.
we are actively working on that. And
Excellent.
it's really exciting.
Yeah, yeah. And when you have these goals defined and you see how close you're getting to it week, month by month, week by week, it's
Yeah.
extremely motivating, exciting to get that done. So another question that was really interesting that I had for you personally is, what do you think is the biggest difference between you in those college years and you now?
I think I have a lot more clarity on what I want to do with my life.
Hmm.
What are the things I want to do, and what are the things I was previously doing just for satisfying others' expectations. Um,
Yes,
I think that's probably the biggest difference. And
love
being
that.
unapologetic about prioritizing what
You
matters for
have to
me
be.
rather than trying to please everything and everyone. And I have learned that that's not in the best interest of anyone. So
If you're
that
trying to do something extraordinary, it's something that's unique. So
exactly.
not many people are going to understand it. By definition, if you're trying to do something extraordinary, not many people understand it. Only a few people will, right? So you can't depend on other people's approval for what you're doing. So I really think that's an important perspective to have. And that I think it's going to be the difference between you pursuing your goals or not pursuing your goals, right? Because as you know, I'm in college too. So
Yeah.
there's sacrifices I have to make to do stuff I do, right? So that's a very important perspective that you provided there. And I believe before we were talking on this podcast, you had a question or two for me.
Oh yeah. I was wondering, like, you are constantly talking to a lot of people
Mhm,
on FX perspective and filtering out noise from the raw value that you want to deliver to your audience.
mhm.
Um, right now, what are one or two tech or business trends that you observe that everyone seems to be hyped about, but you have realized by talking to your host, to your guests, that they are more of a distraction rather
Mhm.
than something real.
Here's a leading question. What is the problem I'm trying to solve? Rather than what kind of trend am I trying to follow? You want to look at the distinction between those two, I think. Rather than trying to follow what other people are doing or other organizations are doing, clearly define what problem you want to solve and then reverse engineer how you're going to do that. Whether that's with AI or without AI, I think that's going to
Hmm.
be a process you can choose from. But I think the biggest difference I'm seeing is that, are you trying to solve a specific problem and add value to the market, or are you trying to appear and follow something that is quite hot? Those are two different things. One is focused on measured impact, the other one's focused on appearance. I think you have to make a very strong distinction between the two. That's what I see as the biggest difference, because I'm not just talking to executives that are
Yeah.
in AI or tech, but I'm also talking to entrepreneurs, and some entrepreneurs or potentially small, medium-sized businesses are focused on trying to do something that is in the loop and that is in the kind of hot, rather than focus on what specific problem I'm trying to solve.
Mhm.
That's one of the biggest things I've seen as a problem, and why I was asking that question between what's the difference between maximizing impact with agentic AI and the difference between doing it because it is a hot topic. That's
Yeah.
a very important topic that I've seen consistently for the last year itself. And I've talked to a couple principal AI architects. I've talked to people like you who all have that similar perspective about really defining what is that business and measurable impact I'm trying to create, and then reverse engineer how I'm utilize AI for it. Because appearance is not really useful unless it's actually making an impact. That's the
Absolutely.
biggest thing I've seen
Yeah.
for sure. So I appreciate that
And,
question.
yeah, and it ties back to your TED talk,
Yeah,
starting with why. And I also love the book with the same title, Start with Why, and
yeah.
you captured exactly that. So thank you so much for answering.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I appreciate the question. So, what I'll do now is I'll go ahead and share a very concise perspective on health and fitness, and we'll go and conclude the podcast with your plans for this year, Shish. So, as you know, a lot of my viewers are entrepreneurs and executives. So, the idea is, can I make this time a time efficient perspective specifically? The biggest issue you're going to see with these health and fitness approaches is the adherence factor. How
Hmm.
well can you adhere to that process? Because if you can't consistently adhere to something, you're not going to end up with that long-term result, right?
Yeah.
So the biggest problem that you can see here is, if there are executives or entrepreneurs who are constantly taking calls like this or potentially traveling, which is not an uncommon situation, a location dependent approach is not going to be as efficient for the adherence
Mhm.
component, right? Because when you're focusing on a location dependent approach where you have to go in person, you have to go to a studio, your entire schedule has to shift around for that particular situation, right? That's the problem behind it. But if you can create a strategy that can adapt to your schedule and your lifestyle, that's gonna be far more. You're gonna be far more capable of adhering to that, and then end up getting that goal yourself. Because in any goal you want to pursue, if you do anything less than what's required, you're not going to get that goal exactly. So that's the idea. How can I create a strategy that's actually something I can adhere to and that can actually allow me to get that goal? What I would recommend is something that's more location independent, something that follows what your schedule, and something that can actually adapt to what you do. And one thing that I think is superior, and I've talked about on the podcast quite often, is leveraging step count. And there's of course a certain amount you have to do, but the idea behind it is that it adapts to what you're doing. It doesn't matter if you're traveling, it doesn't matter if you're taking a call like this, you're listening to this podcast. Essentially, you can be leveraging step count at the same time. So you want something that's adaptable to your schedule and clearly define what goal am I trying to achieve, and how am I going to be able to adhere to the strategy itself. And this is exactly what I use to, of course, lose 70 pounds and keep it off. So hopefully that adds the proper value to the guests and gives a different perspective to what's traditionally told on I guess online and such. So hopefully that was valuable. What we'll do now is go ahead and shift the conversation to Ashish's plans for this year.
Yeah, thanks for that. That's absolutely valuable. Like consistency is the key. I'm a strong believer in that. And what I've felt is like doing something consistently enables you to come in the discipline, because motivation can disappear today or tomorrow. Discipline
Agreed.
is what keeps you going. So thanks for that. And yeah, those pictures I could barely recognize you, but
Yeah,
great work there. Yeah, regarding this year, it's going to be really exciting. As I was saying, like I treat my personal life also as a integrated system, as an
hmm,
organization, and on professional front, I'll soon be transitioning out of Amazon to
okay,
another opportunity that would allow me to operate at a even larger scale and drive
excellent.
and more massive impact. I'll be able to share more details about that in coming weeks. But outside of my engineering, a lot of things are happening in my life. We are, like I was saying, me and my wife are operating as a startup to secure the financial autonomy. And
Excellent.
the why behind all of it is our family infrastructure. So we are managing a 3.5-year-old, and we are looking to welcome another member into our family in coming few
Wow.
months.
Congratulations.
So yeah, thank you. So the way I see it, like the next year, next 12 months are going to be an ultimate exercise in high performance load balancing to
Yes,
make
sounds like
sure,
it.
yeah, to make sure I'm executing at highest tier both tech, um, to secure the financial state, as well as like being entirely present for my family all the time.
Certainly. Is
And
LinkedIn? Apologies. Keep going. Keep going. My
sorry.
apologies.
No, I was just saying like, and in all three, success is the only acceptable outcome.
Love it. Love it. Yeah, and that's always has to be the standard. I love that. So where can people learn more about you and the work you're doing? Is LinkedIn the best place?
Yes.
Excellent.
LinkedIn,
Well,
you can just search for connect to Vaidya, and that's my
okay.
LinkedIn handle.
Excellent. Well, Ashish, thank you for joining me on the podcast. It was a pleasure to have you on. This is
Likewise.
Ari Mohin